Hello, and welcome to Tuesday Reflections, a program brought to you each week by Mallard Creek Presbyterian Church. I'm Rob Watkins, one of the pastors at Mallard Creek, and I thank you for taking time out of your day to join with me for this time of reflection where we think about where our lives of faith intersect with our very real lives. Well, this week what I wanted to reflect on was I just got back from a month-long sabbatical, a chance to rest, reflect, and reconsider many of the things that we are doing as a church and as a pastor, and just thinking again about how to keep our ministries alive and vibrant and so relevant to the rest of the world around us. And I did learn many things while I was gone and gained some new insights and had some new observations about the world around us and the way we can be effective as an instrument of Jesus Christ in that world. Some of the things I learned were rather surprising. First of all, what I learned that was most interesting to me is that younger adults are becoming more and more interested in the church. It doesn't matter which denomination, they're interested in what Roman Catholics are doing, they're interested in what Presbyterians are doing, they're interested in what Lutherans are doing, they're interested in what evangelicals are doing, they're interested in the church, period. One of the reasons for that, or many of the reasons for that, were also very intriguing. I learned something that was a statistic that really shocked me. Did you know that for young men who responded to several questionnaires and polls, that their most intense social interaction is through online video games? This is their human interaction. This is where their friendships are. This is where they're making the most contact with their peers. Online video games. Well, what that means is they're not having any real live interactions with human beings, but rather the virtual interaction that comes through playing a game and the conversation that occurs in and around those games before and after and during. The other thing that I learned is that many of our young adults, and I think this is true for some of our other adults as well, is there's a general sense of unease with the world as it is. So many things seem chaotic, so many things seem out of control, and every time they turn on the news, there's a new image of chaos breaking forth. The whole idea of God's ordering creation becomes inviting. The sense that God can tame the forces of chaos also becomes inviting. And so one of the things that these young folks are beginning to look for is a place where they can have real contact and real connection and real interaction with real human beings. I think that gives us a huge doorway that we can use as a way of inviting folks to become a part of our fellowship of Jesus Christ. People are looking for a place to belong, a place to connect, a place to develop real relationships with actual human beings and to have conversations and to have interactions and to have just time together. That seems so simple and so basic, and yet in our world it's becoming something that's harder to find. We live so much of our lives online now. That's true even for older adults as well as our younger folks. We live so much of our lives virtually. And what happens is we tend to get siloed in those lives. We get a small little experience of life, and it becomes a very confining experience of life as we're surrounded by opinions and voices that resonate with us, but don't really expand our view or our vision of the world around us. And so some of these folks are really hungry for a chance to see outside the silo, so to speak. The other thing that's really striking is the pervasiveness of loneliness. Despite the fact that we can connect literally to anybody, anywhere in the world, loneliness is becoming a plague. It's almost an epidemic. People feel cut off from other people. They feel lonely in their own neighborhoods. They feel lonely in their own environment. I think about that when you see that we're surrounded by apartment towers. And yet one of the things that becomes a reality if the information we're getting is real and true is that life within those apartment towers is isolated. People don't interact a whole lot. They don't really engage with each other a whole lot. So they're looking for a place of community. They're looking for a place where they can find relationships. They're looking for a place where they can find connection. But it goes beyond that. They don't want this just to be frivolous. They want it to be meaningful. They want to find purpose and they want to find intention. Again, with the world seeming to be so chaotic at the moment and so in such a state of disarray, finding an intentionality about things, finding a purpose about things becomes inviting. Oh, there is a direction we can follow. Oh, there is an order to these things. Oh, there is a way of living that provides us meaning and provides us purpose and provides us a way to go, so to speak. So they're coming to church looking for that as well, a sense of what is meaningful. Why are we human beings here? Why do we exist? Why do we even bother? The scriptures tell us that we were made in God's image and we were made to be the caretakers and stewards of the created order. That's all there in Genesis 1. That becomes a driving force that we have to offer. This is why we exist. This is what we exist for. The other thing that's interesting is the hunger for traditional forms of worship among the younger folks. They're looking for something that doesn't look like the rest of the world, that isn't all glitz and light and sound show and song and light show, or, isn't it a great display? They're looking for something that breaks through that seems to be connected to something other than the world around us. And the interesting thing is in Christian liturgy, they're finding that. When they sing hymns and songs, or they hear music that's centuries old, it lifts them out of this context and opens their eyes to a more ancient context. They realize the length of days that the church has had, that the church has been around for 2,000 years, and our liturgy and our music brings that air of mystery and that air of mysticism. That's okay, that's perfect, because it allows us to see there's a world beyond this world. There's a transcendent world and reality that's brought by God. And the more, in a sense, the more mysterious worship is, the more connection there is to the God who seems transcendent and above it all. Ironically, that brings a connection to God. It brings a vision of God that carries them through. So there were many things that I learned, and there are many things that I was encouraged by during my time away, and there were many things that I found very hopeful and imaginative. If we have the willingness to be people of imagination, if we have a willingness to become the people of transformation. Well, one of the things one of the main challenge, the first challenges that we need to address within our communities of faith is how well do we know our own story? And what I mean by that is not the story of our local congregation, but the broader story of the gospel. How well do we know the gospel? How well can we relate to the events that the gospels portray? Something I think all of us need to ask is our own belief in Jesus based on what we've actually read and heard in the scriptures, or is it more rooted in what we've been told the scriptures say, or what we've been told Jesus was all about? There's a key distinction there. How familiar are we with the Gospels? So one of the first places for us within the church to begin is to reacquaint ourselves with the Gospels. It becomes really an easy task. Each day, read a passage of Scripture. Maybe start with Mark, since it's the shortest Gospel, and just read a chapter a day. See what you learn. See if what Mark tells us about Jesus is different or affirming of what you've been told about Jesus. And then when you finish Mark, move to Matthew or Luke and hear how they expand the story that Mark tells. And they add their own unique flavors and their own unique voices to the stories of Jesus. Matthew has his very firm agenda, as does Luke, and they are not the same. They give us very different portraits of Jesus. So read those next and see how that expands our own understanding and our own visions of who and what Jesus was. And then conclude with John, the most mystical of the Gospels, and ironically probably the angriest of the Gospels, because Jesus is in debate more in John than any of the other Gospels. And yet what John offers us is something, that window into the transcendent power of God. By focusing on the Word made flesh, he's reminding us that what we see in Jesus is something that God intended for all the ages. And as we hear John tell us about the 7 great signs, the 7 great miracles that Jesus performed, and how each of those miracles expands our vision of who and what Jesus is, we see how all of this coalesces, all of the Gospels begin to coalesce, and despite the fact that they each give us a different view of Jesus, they're all telling us about the centrality of Jesus to our lives. Like I said, that's a good place for us to start, especially as we begin to answer the imagination and the questions and the interest that's coming from outside. We begin by living into the story that we tell. Well, these are just some of the things I think about, and over the next few weeks I'll probably be expanding on these and saying a little bit more about them. But for now, I think that's probably enough. And I do thank you for joining with me for this time of reflection. Do take care, and may you know God's blessings always. Bye-bye.